The Australian bush has its own language. Most days, it's a symphony. Cicadas droning in the heat, kookaburras laughing, wind whispering through gum leaves. But sometimes, the bush falls silent. Not a bird, not an insect, not even the breeze daring to stir. That silence is different, heavier, as though the land itself is listening. They say the gum trees have stood here longer than memory. That beneath their roots lies something older still, something the earth remembers, even if people have long forgotten. Travelers tell stories of mist that moves against the wind, of shadows that flicker at the corner of your eye, of voices in the stillness that are not your own. Most dismiss such things, but in the northern tablelands, where the granite hills break into endless bushland, some believe the silence carries a warning. The bush keeps its own secrets, and those who do not listen are taken by it. Evelyn Marsh rode in her carriage the final stretch of dirt road as dusk bled into the trees. Her sulky rattled over potholes as the horse weaved around them, dust curling behind her like a pale ghost from the past. The road ended at a clearing where a weatherboard hut sat crooked beneath towering eucalypts. Its paint had long surrendered to the sun, peeling in soft curls. A tin roof caught the last amber light. Beyond it stretched nothing but bush, deep, endless, and waiting. She pulled on the reins, bringing the horse to a halt. The sudden quiet pressed in, so complete it almost rang in her ears. A magpie called once, sharp and lonely, before falling silent. Evelyn drew a long breath. This was why she'd come. Away from the town's endless hubbub of activities and people bustling about their daily business, she wanted stillness, solitude. Time to find herself again in the quiet. The locals at the tiny roadside pub hadn't quite approved. They'd told her the hut was old, that the bush around it wasn't right. A woman with a leathery face had said, half joking, half serious, "Don't go wandering when the mist rolls in. The bush keeps its own secrets." Evelyn had laughed politely, but the words lingered. She unpacked what little she'd brought, a box of books, a sketch pad, an old recorder she sometimes used to capture bird calls. Inside, the hut smelled of timber, dust, and faint smoke, as if fires long gone still clung to the walls. Night crept quickly. The bush seemed to fold in on itself, shadows deepening until the gum trunks stood like pillars of some forgotten temple. The stars came out, sharp and fierce, brighter than any city sky had ever shown her. Evelyn sat on the hut's small veranda, a cup of tea warming her hands. She listened to the forest rhythm, the rise and fall of insect song, the far-off hoot of a nightjar. And then, she noticed something strange. For a moment, everything stopped. The cicadas, the frogs, even the breeze in the trees, all sound fell away. The silence was sudden, unnatural. She held her breath, straining her ears. That was when she felt it. A faint vibration beneath her feet, subtle, like a heartbeat through stone. A low, steady hum that seemed to come from the earth itself. Evelyn frowned, but the sound faded as quickly as it came. The bush stirred again, the insects resuming their chorus as if nothing had happened. She told herself it was just her imagination, just the land settling after a long, hot day. But as she lay in bed that night, staring at the ceiling beams, the words of the leathery-faced woman echoed again in her mind. "Don't go wandering when the mist rolls in." Evelyn turned on her side, trying to sleep, but the silence of the bush pressed closer than dreams. Morning came bright and clean. A pale blue sky stretched over the gums, and the air was cool with dew. Evelyn woke to the distant warble of magpies, their notes rising like ribbons of sound through the bush. For the first time in months, she felt rested. She brewed black coffee on the old wood stove, sipping slowly while watching sunlight spill across the clearing. The silence of last night seemed almost unreal, like a dream that clung only at the edges. By mid-morning, she decided to walk. The hut sat at the edge of a network of bush tracks, some so overgrown they looked more like animal trails than paths. She took her sketchpad and recorder, telling herself she might capture the call of a lyrebird or the flash of a wallaby darting through the undergrowth. The bush welcomed her with the scent of eucalyptus, sharp and sweet. Sunlight filtered down in shifting beams, painting the ferns in gold and shadow. She walked slowly, listening, breathing. Then she heard it. A clear, chiming note, delicate as glass, the call of a bellbird. Evelyn smiled. Bellbirds were rare here, she thought. She followed the sound, stepping carefully over roots and rocks, pushing deeper into the trees. The song rang again, sharp and pure, always just ahead. But something about it unsettled her. The call never changed, no variation, no chorus, just the same note again and again, like a recording played on loop. She quickened her pace. The trees seemed to close in, the undergrowth thickening. Sweat trickled down her back. The bellbird's song drew her onward until, abruptly, it stopped. Evelyn froze. The silence was total, no insects, no wind. Even her breath sounded loud. The air here felt different, heavier. She turned slowly, realizing she had strayed far from any trail. The bush seemed unfamiliar, the trees older, gnarled, their bark etched with deep grooves like scars. Her gaze fell on a cluster of stones half hidden beneath ferns. They rose from the earth in strange, jagged angles, worn smooth by age. Faint patterns were carved into their surface, spirals, lines, shapes that looked almost like constellations. Evelyn knelt, brushing moss away. The carvings were too deliberate to be random, too intricate to be natural. Yet they looked nothing like the Aboriginal rock art she had seen in books. These were different. Alien. A sudden chill passed through the clearing, though the day was warm. Evelyn stood quickly, heart hammering. The silence pressed on her like a weight. And then, faintly, she heard it again, the bellbird's call. But this time, it came from behind her. Evelyn spun around. The trees stood still, unmoving. Nothing stirred. Yet the sound had been clear, close, and impossible. Her mouth had gone dry. She turned back the way she thought she had come, pushing through the undergrowth, her steps quick, almost frantic. After several minutes, the track appeared again, rough and narrow but blessedly real. By the time she reached the hut, sweat soaked her shirt and her hands trembled. She set her recorder on the table and pressed play. Static crackled. Then, a single chiming note. The bellbird's call, clear and impossible. Evelyn stared at the device, her pulse quickening. The recorder had been off the whole time she walked. She hadn't touched it until now. She hit stop, then play again. The call rang once more, echoing through the hut like a memory that did not belong to her. Outside, the cicadas screamed as though nothing at all was wrong. That night, Evelyn couldn't sleep. The recorder sat on the table beside her bed, its small red light blinking as though alive. She had listened to the bellbird's call again and again, each time more unsettled by its flawless sameness, its hollow echo. At some point after midnight, she heard it again, not the bird this time, but the hum. The low vibration that seemed to seep up from the earth itself. She swung her legs out of bed and pressed her bare feet to the floorboards. The vibration was faint, but steady. A rhythm. A heartbeat. Evelyn slipped outside. The night was warm, the sky a canvas of stars so bright they seemed close enough to touch. The bush stood dark and silent around the hut. Yet the hum was stronger out here, rising and falling like breath beneath the soil. She crouched, pressing her palm to the ground. The earth felt alive, pulsing with a slow, ancient rhythm. Sleep, when it came, was restless. Evelyn dreamed of rivers flowing backwards, their waters silver and thick as mercury. She dreamed of stars rearranging themselves into unfamiliar constellations. She dreamed of voices, layered, whispering in a language too old for her to understand. When she woke, she could still hear them. Faint, like an echo caught in her skull. 2 days later, the mist rolled in. It came without warning, curling low and silver through the trees. By late afternoon, the bush had disappeared into a shifting white veil, muffling sound and swallowing distance. Evelyn stood on the veranda, her breath shallow. The mist moved strangely, as though it had weight. Shapes flickered within it, tall, thin, and shifting, dissolving the moment she tried to focus. Her skin prickled. She should have gone inside, locked the door, ignored it. But something pulled at her, a pressure deep in her chest, urging her forward. She stepped into the mist. The world narrowed to a few feet of visibility. The gum trees loomed as pale phantoms, their trunks stretching into nothingness above. Every sound was muted, her footsteps, her breath, the distant drip of water falling from unseen leaves. And then she saw them. Figures at the edge of her sight. Tall, slender, formless. They moved like smoke, flickering in and out of being. Evelyn froze, every muscle tense. The figures did not advance, but they did not retreat either. They simply watched. Her heart thundered in her ears. She felt no immediate threat, but the weight of their presence pressed down on her, ancient and overwhelming. She could not look away. Finally, she stumbled backward, breaking the spell. She turned and ran, the mist thickening around her until she nearly collided with the hut. When she slammed the door shut, she found her hands were shaking. She pressed her back against the wall, trying to calm her breath. The mist lingered for hours, but she did not leave the hut again that night. The next day, Evelyn resolved to find the clearing again, the one with the carved stones. She left at dawn, recorder in hand, following her memory of the bellbird's impossible call. The track twisted and blurred, but eventually the bush opened into that same strange clearing. The stones stood waiting, ancient, watching. But this time, something was different. The ground itself glowed faintly, as though light pulsed just beneath the surface. The earth seemed to breathe, rising, falling like the chest of something vast slumbering below. Evelyn stepped closer, drawn to the glow. Her heart hammered, but her feet moved of their own accord. As she reached the center of the clearing, the hum rose in pitch. It filled her bones, her skull, her very teeth. The air shimmered, bending like heat haze. Shadows flickered at the edges of her vision. She dropped to her knees, pressing her hands against the soil. The glow brightened, golden and unearthly, seeping between her fingers. For a moment she felt herself slipping not down, not up, but through. Panic snapped her back. She staggered to her feet and fled the clearing, branches whipping her face as she ran. When she reached the hut, gasping, she realized her shoes were dusted with something strange, a fine golden pollen that shimmered faintly in the dim light. No matter how she wiped, it would not come off. Evelyn could no longer ignore it. The hum, the mist, the stones, they pressed at her every waking thought. On her next trip into town, she asked questions. At first, people avoided her gaze, pretending not to hear. But after enough persistence, and perhaps a touch of pity, an old stockman agreed to talk. They met on the pub's veranda, the man nursing a beer that looked untouched. His skin was weathered like dried bark, his eyes pale and sharp beneath a brimmed hat. "You've been out near the ridge," he said. Not a question, but a statement. Evelyn nodded cautiously. The stockman spat into the dust. "I've seen 'em too. Tall ones in the mist. Don't belong to this world, nor the next. Older than both." "Ghosts?" she asked softly. He shook his head. "Not ghosts. Not spirits either. They're the land remembering itself. Things that were here before people had words. You hear the hum?" Her pulse quickened. "Yes. That's the earth talking. Some say it's a warning. Others say it's an invitation." His eyes grew distant. "But either way, it never lets go once it has you." Evelyn swallowed. "Has anyone ever disappeared?" The stockman's jaw worked, his teeth grinding. He didn't answer straight away. Finally, he muttered, "More than a few. Best not to go back out there." But Evelyn could hear the unspoken words in his silence. "You already belong to it." That night, Evelyn set her recorder outside on the veranda. She left it running for hours, capturing the sounds of the bush. When she played it back, her stomach tightened. At first, there were only insects and the distant cry of a curlew. But layered beneath, faint but undeniable, were voices. Dozens of them, whispering in overlapping tones. The language was unlike anything she had heard, guttural and melodic, old as stone. She replayed it again and again, straining to catch meaning. Occasionally, a word seemed almost familiar, then slipped away like water through her fingers. As the night deepened, the hum returned, low and steady beneath the floorboards. Evelyn pressed her hands to her ears, but it vibrated through her bones. She closed her eyes, and when she opened them again, she was standing in the trees. Her breath caught. She didn't remember leaving the hut. The recorder was still clutched in her hand, red light blinking. The bush was silent. No wind, no insects. Only the hum, rising and falling, guiding her deeper between the trees. She stumbled forward, as though sleepwalking, her thoughts fogged. When at last she blinked herself awake, the clearing lay before her once more, the stones glowing faintly, the earth pulsing. Her knees trembled. She turned and ran, crashing through the undergrowth, heart hammering like a trapped bird. When she reached the hut, the recorder was still running. She pressed stop with shaking fingers. On playback, she heard her own voice. Not speaking, singing. A low, strange melody that was not hers, but had come from her throat. The mist returned the next night, thick and silver as milk. Evelyn sat awake, her body thrumming with restless energy. The hut's walls seemed too thin, too fragile to contain the weight pressing in from the bush. She could feel them out there, the watchers, the shadows, waiting. At midnight, the door creaked open. Slowly, silently. The mist spilled inside like smoke. Her pulse raced. She should have closed it, locked it, hidden beneath the covers. Instead, she rose, her feet moving without thought. The night air was damp against her skin, the mist curling around her legs. The bush glowed faintly, starlight caught in its drifting shroud. Figures flickered at the edge of sight, tall and expectant. Evelyn stepped forward. Her heart pounded, not with fear, but with an aching sense of inevitability. The hum swelled, resonant and alive, pulling her toward the clearing. She did not resist. When the glow of the stones broke through the mist, it felt less like discovery and more like return, as though she had always been meant to come here. The earth's heartbeat thundered beneath her feet. The shadows gathered, the hum grew louder, shaping itself into words she almost understood. Evelyn closed her eyes and stepped into the light, and the bush fell silent. The clearing blazed with light. Evelyn stood at its edge, her breath caught in her throat. The stones glowed golden, their carved lines alive, shifting like liquid fire. The hum thundered, no longer beneath the earth but in the air itself, vibrating through her body, resonating in her bones. The shadows ringed the clearing. Tall, slender, smoke-like figures, swaying as though moved by a wind that did not exist. They did not step closer, yet their presence pressed upon her, heavy with expectation. Evelyn's fear dissolved. In its place bloomed something stranger, deeper, recognition. She realized, with a clarity that shook her, that the hum was not random. It was a language, a call. The earth was speaking, and she was beginning to understand. The voices filled her mind, memories not her own. She saw fires lit by hands thousands of years gone, stone circles used for ceremonies under skies brighter and blacker than today's. She saw travelers lost in the bush, taken by the mist, their bodies never found, their voices woven into the hum. She saw the land as it once was, unbroken, alive, endless. The watchers leaned closer, their forms rippling. Evelyn swayed, dizzy with visions. She understood in part, the bush did not keep secrets. It remembered. And those who heard its song became part of that memory. The hum rose to a crescendo, a great tidal wave of sound and light. Evelyn staggered forward, her body no longer her own. The ground beneath her feet glowed so bright it burned through her shoes. She sank to her knees, laughter and tears spilling together, though she did not know why. The watchers raised their arms, if arms they were, and the mist closed in. Evelyn felt herself unraveling, not breaking apart, but unfolding, her body dissolving into smoke, into sound, into memory. For a moment, she was everything. The soil, the trees, the stones, the hum itself. She was the bush, ancient and alive. She saw the threads of all who had come before her, woven into the fabric of this place, singing still, and then silence. When the mist cleared, the clearing was empty. The glow faded, the stones dull and cold once more. Only the hum lingered, low and distant, fading into the heartbeat of the land. Evelyn Marsh was gone. Weeks later, hikers found her hut abandoned. The door stood open, the bed neatly made, her belongings untouched. Only her recorder remained on the veranda, battery drained, red light dead. The townsfolk shook their heads. Another one, they muttered, though few said more. The old stockman drank in silence, his eyes hard with something like grief. No trace of Evelyn was ever found. Yet the stories grew. Campers swore that on nights when the mist rolled low and silver, when the cicadas fell suddenly quiet, a woman's voice could be heard singing deep in the bush. A melody strange and sorrowful, carried on the hum of the earth. Some say it is a warning, others, an invitation. But all agree on one thing: the bush keeps its own secrets. And now, Evelyn Marsh is one of them. Evelyn's brother Daniel had been working overseas. Hearing of her disappearance, returned to search for his sister. The hut hadn't changed. Daniel Marsh stepped out into the stillness of the clearing. The old weatherboard sagged, just as Evelyn had described, the veranda leaning slightly as though bowing under the weight of years. The tin roof glared back at him in the sunlight, bleached and hot to the touch. But the silence felt wrong. The cicadas droned, yes, and magpies warbled from the tree line, yet beneath those familiar bush sounds was something deeper, a vibration too low to hear but impossible not to feel. It thrummed faintly in his chest, like a faraway generator buried under the earth. He adjusted his pack and stood still, the sweat already breaking across his brow. This was where Evelyn had vanished, where the police reports ended, where his sister's voice in her final recordings began to blur with something else. Daniel swallowed hard and forced himself forward. Inside, the hut smelled of dust and timber, of long-dead fires, and the faint tang of eucalyptus drifting through the cracks. On the table, half buried in grime, lay Evelyn's voice recorder. He reached for it, heart pounding, thumb brushing the switch. It was dead. But just as his skin touched the plastic, the faint vibration in the floor beneath his boots pulsed again. For a fleeting moment, Daniel could have sworn it was timed with his heartbeat. The locals had warned him not to come. They'd watched him with the same suspicion they had given Evelyn. One man at the pub had muttered, "Don't go near the ridge." Another spat and walked out. Only one had spoken plainly, the old stockman. "Your sister didn't get lost. The bush took her, and it doesn't give back what it keeps." Daniel clenched his jaw. He wasn't leaving until he found her. Or the truth. The hut seemed to breathe around him as the sun dipped lower, and for the first time, he wondered if the stockman had been right. He had told himself this was about closure, about laying Evelyn to rest. But Daniel knew better. He wasn't here to mourn, he was here to drag her back from wherever she'd gone. He unfolded her notebook on the table. The pages were littered with her cramped handwriting, half-legible sketches of spirals, circles of stone, and strange shapes that looked like figures seen through fogged glass. One line chilled him most. "The song grows louder when I sleep. It wants me awake." Daniel brushed a hand over his face and laughed bitterly. He had called her fanciful, obsessed, had told her she was chasing ghosts in the bush, and then she'd vanished, leaving only this notebook and a final recording. He powered on his own recorder and pressed play. At first, just static. Then Evelyn's voice, clear, steady. "I can't tell if it's outside or inside me anymore. The hum, it knows I'm listening. It knows my name." The voice crackled, and something shifted in the background, a harmony, faint and unnatural, like wind moving through bone. Then, unmistakably, a second voice joined hers, a whisper. "Daniel." The recorder slipped from his hand and clattered on the floor. He hadn't imagined it. It had said his name. The next morning, Daniel drove into town. He needed answers, even if they came in fragments. The pub was as unfriendly as it had been the night before. Conversations died when he entered, eyes following him with quiet disapproval. He ordered a beer he didn't want and tried not to flinch at the way the barman slid it across without a word. Eventually, a woman in her 50s, sharp-eyed, carrying herself like someone used to whispers, approached. She set down a folded piece of newspaper without looking at him. "Don't ask me," she muttered. "Just read." Then she walked out. Daniel unfolded the yellowed clipping. The headline read, "Search abandoned for missing hikers, 1,974. The article described 3 bushwalkers who had vanished near the ridge, last seen heading towards the clearing. Their camp had been found, abandoned. No bodies recovered. As he read, a voice rasped near his shoulder. "Paper won't tell you everything." Daniel turned. It was the old stockman. His skin was leathered, eyes pale and unblinking. "You think you're here to find her? You're not." The man leaned closer. "The bush doesn't lose people. It keeps them. Every voice, every step held in the dirt. And if you listen long enough, it'll keep you too." Daniel tried to respond, but the old man had already shuffled away, leaving him with the clipping and a hollow dread that settled in his gut. By midday, Daniel was back in the bush. He couldn't ignore it. The compulsion to follow Evelyn's path was stronger than his fear. The track narrowed as it wound deeper, the canopy closing above, light thinning into green shadow. Every so often he thought he heard footsteps behind him, but when he turned, there was only the bush, endless and watching. At last, he stepped into the clearing. The stones Evelyn had sketched were real, a circle half buried in the earth, their surfaces carved with spirals and lines that shimmered faintly in the shade. He knelt, fingers brushing one. The grooves were too sharp to be ancient. Someone, or something, had carved them recently. The hum returned, vibrating through his ribs. It was louder here, undeniable, a deep resonance that seemed to pulse with his heartbeat. Daniel stumbled back, heart hammering. The air grew thick, and for a moment he thought he saw movement in the corner of his vision, a figure at the tree line, watching. But when he turned fully, the clearing was empty. Only the stones remained, and the hum steady and patient, as though it had been waiting for him all along. That night, Daniel lit the fireplace in the hut. The bush outside pressed close, the eucalypts groaning in the wind like restless sleepers. He wanted warmth, But more than that, he wanted company. As he stoked the embers, his eyes caught something blackened and brittle in the ash. Carefully, he pulled it free, the half-burnt remains of a notebook. His chest tightened. It was Evelyn's handwriting. The first pages were ruined, smeared into charcoal. But fragments survivent. Spirals drawn over and over, circles like the ones carved into the stones, and words scrawled in a frantic hand. The hum grows stronger when I resist. They say the song is memory, not death. If I refuse, they'll take him instead. Daniel's blood ran cold. Him. She had known. Somehow, Evelyn had known it would come for him too. He pressed the pages to his chest, heart thundering. The hum seemed to answer, vibrating faintly beneath the floorboards, as though it had heard her words, as though it had been waiting for him all along. The recorder clicked on with a faint whir. Daniel lay on the cot in the dark hut, eyes fixed on the ceiling, the recorder balanced on his chest. The hum was there, low, steady, alive. He whispered, "Evelyn," as though daring it to answer. When he played the recording back, the blood drained from his face. At first, only static. Then the hum, and layered beneath it, Evelyn's voice. Daniel. It wasn't a memory. She was saying it now, through the mist, through the earth. Her tone wavered, part plea, part command. Then the harmony rose, other voices joining, a chorus swelling like a tide. The words twisted, distorted, but he could almost make them out. Join, stay, belong. His hands shook. He held the recorder across the room, heart hammering, breath ragged. Silence rushed back, thick and suffocating. But in that silence, just for an instant, he thought he heard her outside the hut. Soft footsteps, and a whisper against the window, "Come out." The next day, Daniel pushed deeper into the ridge. He followed faint trails through ironbark and bloodwood, past gullies choked with ghost gums whose white trunks glowed like bones. By afternoon, he found it, the remains of a camp half swallowed by earth. Rusted pots, a canvas torn to rags, a lantern shattered among the leaves. The clipping had been right. The lost searchers of 1974 had been here. As dusk fell, the mist came rolling in, thick and silver, curling around the trees like smoke. Shapes moved within it, first shadows, then figures. Daniel froze. Men in bush gear, blurred and indistinct, walked between the trees. Their lanterns glowed faintly, swinging, though no flame burned within. Their faces were pale smears, unfinished, as though the mist itself hadn't decided what they looked like. They moved without sound, their boots never breaking twigs, their mouths opening and closing in silent words. One turned towards him, a hand lifted, pointing. Daniel stumbled back, breath tearing in his lungs. The figures dissolved into the fog, swallowed whole. But their lanterns hung in the mist a moment longer, suspended, glowing faintly, until even they winked out, leaving him alone, with the hum in his chest and the memory of eyes that had no faces. Back in town, Daniel sought out the local library. Dust and silence clung to the shelves, the smell of old paper mixing with floor polish. He had hoped for maps, for records of the ridge. Instead, he found someone waiting. A woman in her 60s, grey hair pinned in a bun, regarded him from behind the desk. "You're Evelyn's brother," she said, as if it were fact, not question. Daniel nodded, wary. "You won't find what you're looking for in books," she said softly. "But I'll tell you what I know." Her name was Miriam, a retired schoolteacher. She led him to a folio of sketches made decades earlier by surveyors, drawings of the ridge before it was ever cleared. Circles of stone. Strange spirals in the earth. The first peoples believed that place was a songline, she explained. A track the world itself sings, binding spirit and memory to the land. They said the stones could hold voices, not just of the dead, but of the living too. Daniel's throat tightened. "You mean, Evelyn?" "I mean," Miriam said carefully, "that the bush doesn't end a life. It remembers it, stores it. But not everyone is meant to be remembered that way." Her eyes fixed on him. "If you keep listening, it'll claim you too." The hum seemed to stir in his chest even as she spoke, as if in agreement. The Marsh family farm was 3 hours south. Daniel hadn't been back in years, but one call to his uncle unearthed stories he had never heard. "Your great-grandmother's brother," the old man rasped over the crackling phone line, "walked into the scrub in 22, never came out. My father always said he heard his voice on still nights, just like your sister." Daniel gripped the receiver until his knuckles whitened. Why didn't anyone tell us? Because it doesn't matter. Once the bush chooses a line, it doesn't let go. A pause, heavy with something close to fear. Evelyn wasn't the first marsh to vanish, and you won't be the last if you stay there. Daniel hung up, his hand trembling. The hum inside him was no longer faint. It was pulsing, insistent, keeping time with his heart. And he knew now why Evelyn had tried to burn her journal. She hadn't just been afraid of the watchers. She had been afraid for him. The mist returned the following evening, rolling across the clearing like a tide. Daniel stood in its pale wash, his breath quick, his recorder clutched in his hand. And then she appeared. Evelyn, her figure emerged from the gums, half shadow, half light, her face flickering as though caught between frames of film. For a heartbeat, she was herself, the sister he remembered, eyes full of determination. Then her features shifted, blurred, became something inhuman, her smile too wide, her eyes too pale. "Evelyn!" he cried. Her lips moved, no sound at first, then a whisper, "Go back." But as the mist thickened, her voice fractured into layers, harmonies weaving into the hum. Another phrase bled through, trembling, desperate. "Or join me." Daniel stumbled forward, tears burning his eyes. She raised a hand, palm outstretched, her face splitting again between human sorrow and otherworldly command. And then she was gone, swallowed whole by the fog. The clearing rang with silence, but inside him, the hum sang louder than ever. The circle of stones waited for him. By nightfall, the mist lay heavy, silver strands weaving through the trunks, clinging to his skin. The hum vibrated in his chest, stronger than ever, pulling him forward like a tide. He stepped into the clearing. The moment his boots touched the earth inside the circle, the world shifted. The mist rose in pillars, and voices erupted around him. Not whispers this time. A chorus, dozens, maybe hundreds, layered upon each other, weaving into a sound both beautiful and terrible. Men and women, young and old, voices from every lost decade, and rising above them all, Evelyn's, clear, strong, leading them. Daniel fell to his knees, overwhelmed. He wanted to cover his ears, but there was no escaping it. The sound was inside him, resonating through his bones. The ground itself seemed to breathe beneath him, pulsing with memory, alive. The stones glowed faintly, lines of light tracing the spirals Evelyn had drawn. He looked up, and in the mist saw faces. Not full, not complete, fragments, flickers of people he almost recognized. A woman carrying a lantern, a boy with frightened eyes. The searchers, the lost. The bush had kept them all. The figures pressed closer, the chorus rising to a fever pitch. Then one stepped forward. Evelyn. Her face was clearer now, but it shifted as she spoke. Human one moment, blurred the next. Her eyes locked on his, shimmering with sorrow. Daniel. He reached for her, choking back a sob. Evelyn, come home. Please. Her head shook slowly. This is home now. The bush doesn't take to destroy, it takes to remember. We're part of it, Daniel. Carried forever. He shook his head, fighting the pull of her words. That's not living. No, she whispered. It's something else. The watchers moved closer, their hollow faces turned towards him. Evelyn's voice trembled. They don't want you yet, but if you stay, they'll claim you. Our bloodline is tied to this place. I tried to protect you. Her hand reached out, half solid, half mist. Leave now, or join me. But if you step further into the circle, there's no going back. The hum inside him surged, vibrating until he thought his heart would burst. The chorus swelled, Evelyn's voice threading through it, rising like a beacon. The mist tightened around him, closing the world into silver walls. Daniel's body trembled, torn between terror and longing. To leave meant losing her forever. To stay meant surrender, his voice, his self, woven into the earth. Evelyn's hand hovered inches from his. Together, she whispered, or apart. Tears blurred his vision. His heart beat in time with the hum, each pulse dragging him closer. He took one step forward. The mist surged. Evelyn's eyes lit with sorrow and relief all at once. Their hands met, and the world dissolved into sound. The chorus roared, swallowing him whole. For a fleeting instant, he felt himself unravel, threads of memory pulled loose, woven into the song. And in that endless harmony, Evelyn's voice wrapped around his, binding them together. Then there was nothing but the hum. Weeks later, hikers passing the ridge spoke of an unease in the air. The old hut stood empty, untouched. Daniel's belongings gathering dust, the old stockman shook his head. Another disappearance, another loss to the bush. But those who camped nearby told different stories. On misty nights, when the wind fell still, a sound rose from the eucalypts, low at first, then swelling into haunting harmony. And if you listen closely, beneath the chorus of countless voices, you could pick out two that sang together, bound and inseparable. A brother and sister, Daniel and Evelyn Marsh. Their song carried on the night air, echoing beneath the gum trees. Forever.